Welcome to the Potter Blog site, June 11th, 2013. The National Vaccine Advisory Committee held a meeting today on partially about the H7N9 vaccine. The majority of the following information was gleaned from today's public meeting of the National Vaccine Advisory Committee. If you're interested at all in what's happening with H7N9 and the billions of dollars the government is doing to prep for H7N9 pandemic, and it's a hemorrhagic flu, which is something most people don't know about, then please continue to watch. This is the agenda from today's meeting. It's much like the previous agenda we showed. One key difference, and that is Dr. Nancy Cox of the Influenza Division of the CDC was supposed to present, but instead we have Dr. Annie Shushat. She's I believe a step above of Dr. Cox. She's director of immunization and infectious diseases, I believe, at the Center for Disease Control. She's also a rear admiral and assistant attorney general. The next presenter is Dr. Robin Robinson from BARDA, which is the biowarfare rough equivalent of DARPA. This is what we gleaned from today's meeting. Some of it's very interesting. First thing is that human-to-human transmission is the government's public pandemic focus. So when they're doing this planning, at least what they're telling the public about, their prime factor is whether or not there's human-to-human transmission. Now that's interesting because the thing that's got this whole thing all stirred up is the fact that there's been a lot of bird-to-human transmission. And in the question and answer section of this vaccine meeting, there was a direct question asked about the concerns of pigeon-to-human transmission, but that question was sidestepped. Really didn't answer it. They just went on to talk a little bit about how they didn't really understand what was happening in China, but they didn't talk at all about the risks of pigeon-to-human transmission. It makes me wonder if that subject might be classified. It's pretty clear that if somebody dropped off a couple of H7N9 infected pigeons back in last March or April in a major U.S. city, there'd be thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people dead. Well, let's go on. H7N9 is of great concern to the government because of the unusually rapid explosion in the number of cases. And basically what they were saying here is that compared to H5N1, H1N1, they basically went from no cases to 100 cases really, really quick in China. So that was very unusual how rapidly it developed. Second issue, the minimal number of bird infections detected. There weren't really a lot of detections of H7N9 in birds. So it seems like a good number of people got affected by a small number of animals. Very strange. And then the third thing that really spooked them was the rapid adaptation to mammalian receptors. What this means is that when they were testing the various infections, they found that some of these, as the virus changed, that it rapidly changed to be able to infect mammals. Another key thing that was learned was that the vaccine will be laced with AS03 and or MF59 adjuvants. The government has these adjuvants stockpiled. Adjuvants have never been used before in the United States in any sort of flu vaccine, either pandemic or seasonal. So this is a big step. These adjuvants have been tied to narcolepsy with the swine flu vaccinations in Europe. Based on what we heard in the meeting, it seems to us that the narcolepsy that was tied to the adjuvants, instead of being tied to the adjuvant, it's going to be tied with the manufacturer and his location. So in other words, they're going to blame GSK in Germany for the cause of this, and not GSK in Canada who's making the same adjuvant. So it appears And it's subtle, but that they're going to try to get past the narcolepsy aspect and all the other things that adjuvants cause by saying it's tied to the manufacturer, not to the adjuvant itself. Now, here's another very interesting bit of information, and that is that the non-adjuvant dose would be 90 micrograms and take 18 months and $10 billion to produce. Now, I guess I should mention what an adjuvant is for those of you who don't know. An adjuvant is something you add to a vaccine, and it causes, it's like putting crack in a vaccine. It causes your immune system to go into overdrive. It makes it act really strong and fast to whatever they put in the vaccine. And the reason they do this is so they can use smaller amounts of vaccine in each shot. Or, in the case of H7N9, there's a secondary aspect to it, is that people's immune systems don't react very strongly to the vaccine. So either you need a lot of vaccine, which 90 micrograms is, or you need somewhat less vaccine and an adjuvant to really boost your immune system to react to it like crazy. So now here's the part which I'm surprised they said, because one would think it would be classified, because this gives away our strategic capability to how much vaccine we can produce. So they said the non-adjuvant dose would be 90 micrograms was their estimate. It would take 18 months and tens of billions of dollars to produce. So if they add adjuvants to it, maybe they use a lot less, maybe 10 or 12 micrograms, and they can therefore use a smaller amount, which takes a shorter time to produce. And since they're using a smaller amount, they can, it's like adding hamburger helper to the vaccine. Hamburger helper on crack. It increases your usage of it. It saves money. Not necessarily good for you. Other interesting thing about the H7N9 vaccine is it will be given in 2 shots. The person will be primed first with a shot containing a live attenuated virus. That's a little bit scary, especially since this stuff is experimental still, especially with H7N9. The person will receive later a second shot with an inactivated virus. And the reason they're doing this is because people's immune systems do not react strongly to H7N9, even if they use some adjuvants. Apparently this methodology, there were some experiments that showed that it causes a robust and rapid immunogenic response to the vaccine. That said, the vaccine will not give you immunity to H7N9. Rather, they believe it's only going to lessen the symptoms of it. Here's some other things we picked up, and this is ancillary what was mentioned, but it was tangentially mentioned in this meeting. And that is Alaska is the natural path for an H7N9 pandemic to spread. I'm going to show you a map here. Excuse me. This is a map of bird immigration. This is from the USDA, so bird migration. The red dots are birds that were discovered in the United States that were banded in foreign countries, Asia specifically. The blue dots are birds that were banded somewhere in the United States and then found in foreign countries. So if you look, the migration routes, which are normally north and south, cross here in Alaska. That means that this bird flu that's here in China, if it comes in naturally, will cross first through Alaska and come down into the west coast. Interesting, there's also, it looks like it might also come across the Arctic Circle down into Nova Scotia, I believe this is. So if there's a H7N9 bird flu outbreak in the United States, you would expect it first to happen in any of these regions on the map here that are shown in red. Now, apparently the travel time is long enough where a bird that had it 2 months ago in China is not going to make it across. So it's going to hop and skip and jump from birds, and there may be some changes in the virus before it gets to here. But all these red dots are locations where if H7N9 pandemic hemorrhagic bird flu virus picks up in the United States, where one might expect to see it first. Now, if all of a sudden, though, we start seeing it in Atlanta or New York City, then the introduction was not natural, more than likely. The biggest risk, and we'll go back to our sheet here, is what we call the biowarfare path, and that is major cities' feral pigeon populations. Like we said earlier, somebody puts H7N9 bird flu, especially in the fall and winter or early spring, into a pigeon population, then you don't have to worry about human-to-human spread, because people living in urban centers will be directly exposed constantly through the feral pigeon population. But that's a thing that, at least publicly, CDC is not eyeing, and again, they avoided that question in this vaccine meeting. So there may be some indication that this is a classified thing. Maybe, maybe not. Other thing is, the levels of concern raised in the meeting, while they were high, did not match the amount of money being poured into H7N9. And so they were downplaying things some in the meeting. But if you look at these federal biz ops solicitations, and this is one that just came out on June 5th, I'll read here. It says that the CDC needs some reagent kits immediately for the H7N9 outbreak and continuing surveillance work. The amount of kits they're ordering here, what these kits do, they will allow them to test 300,000 patients who are infected with the virus, with the H7N9 virus, to see if that virus responds to antiviral medications. So why do they have an immediate need for 300,000 tests for patients that are already infected with the virus, and to see if that virus is affected by antiviral drugs? Now, patients in this case, it doesn't necessarily have to be a human. It could be an animal. It could be they're testing birds. But 300,000 and the immediate need indicates something's going on. They've also ordered 512 million syringes, enough to give every person in the country 2 shots, which happens to go right along with what they're saying that they're going to do. So the meeting underplayed things. Now, here on our webpage, one thing we've suggested is if you want to understand what the CDC's vision of these things are, is go rent the movie Contagion. It's not a very good movie, but it's not horrible. But in essence, it was written and directed by the CDC as a budget-raising propaganda movie. If you keep that in mind, that it's really sort of a propaganda movie, and you'll get an idea of what they think will happen and what their perfect solution is for them to come out like the White Knight heroes, and what they will and won't tell you about what's going on and why they won't tell you. The other thing you can do, stuff we've mentioned, we've recently suggested P100 particulate masks and surgical N95 masks. Read more of that in more detail. Something we've also discussed in quite some detail is chlorhexidine gluconate Hibiclens. Go to the website if you're interested in these things. Click on it and you'll understand. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it because we've talked about it in nearly every video we put out on this, but they are low-cost things that will provide a level of protection, especially the chlorhexidine gluconate. You can use whether there is or is not an H7N9 hemorrhagic bird flu outbreak. Our best guess is that the odds are there will not be one. But the government is spending money like crazy, specifically directed H7N9. So something's going on there. Doesn't hurt to be watchful.